Welcome to episode 7 of the Pioneer Podcast. I'm Matt Richards, and in today's episode, we dive into a conversation that Billy Kennedy and I had about Ephesians 4 ministry, or the fivefold ministry. So this is a great conversation. I know you're going to love it. I loved having it. So sit back, enjoy the watch or the listen, and we'll see you on the other side. Well, today we're going to be talking about Ephesians 4 ministry, the fivefold ministry.
Yeah.
We're going to go a brief synopsis of each one of the gifts, but then I think we'll take a deep dive into it later on and break them apart and go into study on each one of those.
Yeah, excellent. So obviously Pioneer is an apostolic network.
Yep.
And we very much use the Ephesians 4 ministry gifts as like the foundation of how we function and operate. I think that if you go right back and go, well, what's the purpose of the church? And the purpose of the church is to demonstrate to those around powers and principalities and people who God is, and so we are on a mission. The church is a mission, and the church is a movement.
Yeah.
And how we maintain the movement is key, because we quickly default to a parish, pastoral, congregational model of church that is quite static. So when Jesus commissioned his disciples to go into all the world, preach the gospel, to make disciples, he had a way of doing it. And so Paul then talks about in Ephesians 4, when Christ ascended to heaven, he gave gifts. So he gave anointings to people to fulfill the mandate of the church: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. So if that's what Jesus has given to the church, then surely that's what we need to be focusing on in regards to roles and leadership and ministry within the church.
Yeah, and as we've talked before, having that pastoral leadership is definitely needed in the church, but it's not always the main leader of the church. It's a gift that Christ has given to us.
Yeah, well, Paul said God has given first apostles. Now, that doesn't mean like hierarchically they're top of the tree, and we all submit and honor to the apostle, which it happens in some places, but it's very much about it sets the direction of travel, that the ones who are sent are leading the movement. And I think that's the bit where we need to really get back to. And I think, it's I'm from the UK, as you know, and Pioneer began in the UK. But a pre-Christian Britain was not evangelized by parish churches. It was evangelized by communities of men and women in the monastic movement who came together, who shared life together, and then went out on mission. Yeah. And so there's a great sense of momentum that took place. In time, as groups were established, then these parish churches were set up, and then the government, the monarchy at the time, used the parish system as a way of collecting the taxes. And so there came a point where no one was not a Christian anymore, because they were all Christian, because they were British, they were English.
Because the king was Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the parish priest was the cure of the souls, so the care of the souls, basically. So even today, when a parish priest is prayed in England, they are commissioned to care for the souls in the parish, the whole parish. So the imperative mission had gone because everyone was Christian. So really the goal was to look after people, marry them, christen them, bury them.
It was shepherding more than anything else.
Exactly. So we lost that sense of momentum, and over the centuries, groups emerged, sprung up, broke away from the state church, your Baptists, Congregationalists, Quakers, Methodists,
Brethren. But
they quickly default back to the parish model. They don't call it a parish, but it becomes the congregation. And so how we maintain the movement is critical for us today. So we want to look at these 5 ministries. Just give a quick overview of each how they function, what they look like. Okay, so that's the plan.
Okay.
For today.
All right. So first one,
apostle. Now this is the only word that is transliterated, i.e., that means we use the Greek word to have an English word, and it doesn't explain what it does. So it means the one who is sent. a prophet prophesies, and evangelist evangelizes, a pastor pastors, and a teacher teaches, but an apostle is the one who was sent. So the primary job of the apostle is to extend the mission, is to lead into new areas, take the gospel where the gospel is not known. There's a grace upon an apostle, I believe, for breakthrough, to step into new areas where there's nothing, see something established. And there's also a grace upon apostles to build, a wisdom to build. Paul described himself as a wise master builder, an architecton. So he has if you like, the blueprint from heaven, how church should be, and he has the wisdom to know what's needed next. And so that's the role of the apostle. It's to maintain the missional focus within a church. It's to keep the ethos, the missional DNA alive in a church. It's to plant new churches. It's to develop existing congregations to become much more missionally focused, to innovate, to cultivate, if you like, entrepreneurship. We don't just want churches to be cookie cutters, as we've said on numerous occasions. Apostles are, if you like, the connecting point in a translocal mobile environment, and so apostles travel generally. You find a few apostles that are static, but generally I think the apostolic ministry is quite a mobile ministry. They are interested in the health of the organizations, the communities of which they are part, and they're able to identify and release other ministries, both emerging ministries and those who are more established. And so I think the apostle is like the sort of the glue, the connector, that keeps the whole thing moving in the right direction. So that to me is the apostle.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't, if that makes sense to you guys, also a great way would be to go back and listen or watch the episode on the core values of Pioneer, of what missional is, and that will help solidify that a little bit more in your mind if you are still struggling with that.
The second one is then the prophet.
Yeah.
God has given apostles and he's given prophets. Now, what do prophets do? Well, we probably have a lot more examples of prophets in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And they see, they unlock situations, they maintain or help the church to maintain a God orientation. So particularly a lot of the messages in the Old Testament in the prophets was about calling Israel back to God, to repent, to turn from their selfish ways, to put God back at the center. And so prophets help us to maintain that sense of heavenward focus. They help us to encounter God. They help us to understand the heart of God. Prophets are very passionate people, I tend to find.
Yeah.
They speak truth to power, speak truth to structures. I think prophetic ministry working alongside apostolic ministry is a great blend, great partnership. I think sometimes when the prophetic ministry is not aligned apostolically, i.e. not aligned into a missional context, they can go a little bit weird and end up picking up secondary issues rather than primary issues.
Yeah. I've seen that. I had one of our mentors always said, major on the major things and minor on the minor things.
Yeah. Prophets are great at identifying strongholds, blockages, championing justice. I think a lot of the people who speak up on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves are prophets. They call us to holiness. They have a sense of urgency about them. So I think that the prophet is a great gift to have in the midst, and particularly alongside the apostle. the foundation of apostolic and prophetic ministry is so important, and I think the enemy just challenged those partnerships.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can definitely I've seen that in especially my wife's life being highly prophetic, and there's times where we're in church, and she'll just come to me and say, "This is what's going on in the spirit.
Yeah,
God says this." I'm like, "Get up there and say it." And when she does pull that and pulls that uh, piece of heaven down,
yes,
it sets something free. But then the enemy will try to
yeah,
come and divide in any
yeah,
situation with
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I think it's a there are different levels of prophecy as there are with all of the gifts, and so for someone to attain or reach the office of a prophet, it's probably years of schooling and developing of the gifting, and bearing in mind that all prophecy is to edify, to encourage, to support. I think that therefore in the mission of the church to have the prophetic ministry is so important. I've got a friend of mine who's gifted prophet, who I let him know where I'm traveling, what I'm doing, and he'll like be praying for me, and if he's got a word, he'll send it through, or he'll phone me and say, "Billy, you got to think about this when you're away." So I think that those gifts together functioning are fantastic. I think Pioneer, I would say, Gerald Coates, who was the founder of Pioneer, one of the the early founding father, was a prophet, was very prophetic, and so Pioneer as a movement was a very prophetic movement.
It was ingrained in their DNA from the start.
Well, exactly. So it'd be something that we would hold to strongly, and then adding in the apostolic framework that we've brought since. Those two together, I think, is a great combination.
Yeah, I mean the apostolic leading and moving the ministry forward, and the prophet hearing from heaven, and giving insight and directions in those areas. What God is saying is just is key.
Exactly. So the third gift then we see in that Ephesians 4 passage is the evangelist, and we probably think we all know what that looks like.
We think Billy Graham.
yeah. And I would say for me, evangelists gather and evangelists win would be my sort of summary. They tend to be good communicators, but they just have an ability to clinch the deal.
Yeah, they're very charismatic in dealing with people.
I mean, you and I can talk to people about Christ, and for months and months, but they just have an ability to like step in and clinch the deal.
It is. I've watched it happen before. 10 minutes and he's healed and born again, and it's like we've spent months talking to him, and you're 10 minutes and you've got that person
exactly.
And like it's amazing to watch.
I mean, my father was an evangelist.
Really?
I used to dread bringing friends home from school because I knew what would happen. Within 5 minutes he'd be on them. So evangelists, they have an ability to communicate, to gather people, to win people, to get them over the line. They're able to be culture relevant to they're passionate. They have a love for God, a love for people. So they're great people to have around. They can be a challenge to have on your team, because they can often see they're so focused on winning people to Christ, like everything else. Why are we dealing with budgets and pastoral care and small groups? Just get everyone out on the street and get them witnessing, and that'll solve. So
they're always on the hunt for the next person.
Absolutely,
they're looking for the next person.
Absolutely. So they are fantastic people to have around, passionate. So the evangelists, I think we've rediscovered what they are. I think, as you say, probably post Second World War, Billy Graham led the way, and across
Reinhard Bonnke.
Across the globe now, there's hundreds of them and thousands of them who are operating in all sorts of ways.
And with the technology we have now, it's just incredible that
Yeah.
evangelism can be completely different than it was 50 years ago.
Hugely different. And the opportunity for people to touch the masses through technology is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So again, I think within a network context, within the broader context, to have these people who not only do the work of the evangelist, but also equip the saints, and that to me probably is the underlying piece for all of these gifts, is that they are not only there to do what God's called them to do, they're also there to equip God's people to do it. So we have an evangelistic community that emerges, not just a few raging, roaring evangelists.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that DNA goes into everyone, so anybody can evangelize, whether in your workplace, home, moms groups, on the subway, the bus, whatever.
Exactly. So I mean, things like Alpha has sprung up in the last decade or two. Nicky Gumbel, who heads that up, I know Nicky, and he would say he is an evangelist. Now,
he's sharp. He's very sharp.
They've seen millions go through Alpha. It's incredible.
And he still runs his own Alpha group.
Exactly. Yeah. He has done for like 25 years.
Yeah. So. I've seen Alpha pop up in so many new places.
Yeah. Yeah, again, so it's a different model for different sort of people, and I know evangelists in Australia and in Africa and Asia, all different, but seeking to communicate the good news of Christ in that context.
That's good.
So the evangelists, we need to see them raised up, released, find a secure home, and because as I say, often in a local church, we can't quite work out where they fit, and so they often will leave and start their own ministries. Yeah, because that's the only way that they can function and survive.
I think it's key for the local church to support the evangelist as a local part of that body, but help them to push that gift out into the world, because that is going to draw people to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, and the next one is, so sometimes people put these two together. So I'm going to keep them separate for the time being. So the pastor, the teacher.
Yep.
So the pastor, or maybe a better word would be shepherd.
Yep.
We've ended up using the word pastor to mean church leader.
Yeah.
So particularly in the sort of non-conformist churches. So within the Anglican or the Catholic Church, their father, the reverend, the vicar.
Yeah.
The priest, and so we've adopted in the non-conformist churches, the Baptist, Methodist, Congregational, Pentecostal, Charismatic new churches, the word pastor. And so you lead the church, Matt, you're Pastor Matt.
Yeah.
Or that's what people like to call you.
I've been called that before.
So so it's not that title, it's the function of the shepherd.
Yeah.
And so the shepherd nurtures God's people, cares for God's people, protects God's people, builds community. I mean, they're community builders. They're warm. They're inclusive. They're generous. They create safe spaces. They enable people to flourish. They cultivate God-centered community, and so that's what the shepherd does. And they are such a vital gift.
Yeah, I like the pastor term because it has been thrown around so much. The shepherd term, I think, needs to start being used more, because my wife, like I've said before, highly shepherd. She will always. She's always looking, where's a need? How do I take care of somebody? How do I get them where they need to be?
Yes, and I find that if your church is primarily led by apostolic, prophetic, or by evangelistic people, that they're so focused on the mission,
we forget the people involved in it.
Right. And we're always moving on to the next thing. And I think probably for me, looking back on my leadership journey, where we've not had a shepherd functioning alongside my gift, we've been poor because of it. And so I do think it's vitally important. And it is the sense of the functioning together. So there's lots of great pastors, lots of great shepherds who are leading churches, and that's why I think for me the important thing of the apostolic input in a network context. It doesn't say that every church needs to have an apostle in place, but there needs to be a connection to apostolic leadership.
Yeah.
That will just keep the mission moving.
Yeah.
But you do need then the shepherds in place to be caring for the people, discipling the people, healing the people.
Yeah, they're very much like an attendant.
Yes.
They're watching to make sure. If you look at the shepherd in the Bible, they were sleeping at the gates of the pens when they would put the sheep in. They're guarding from the wild animals. That they're more mindful of what is going on around the flock to make sure that the flock is well taken care of.
Exactly. So I do think that naturally you will see more people who have a shepherding gift leading local church.
Yeah.
So that isn't bad. It's just that we need to be connected into the apostolic framework in order to maintain the momentum.
It's because they have that little bit of a heart of an evangelist, that they want everybody to be born again, taking, in the kingdom of heaven, and taken care of and grown and discipled.
Well, no, exactly. I think it's interesting that when Jesus makes the comment in Matthew 9 and 10, where he says, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into the harvest field. It was because he saw the people who were like sheep without a shepherd.
Yeah.
So what sort of workers do you need in the harvest field if the sheep are like sheep without, if the people are like sheep without a shepherd? You need shepherds.
Yeah. And you'll watch their hearts break when
absolutely
when someone falls away or when something bad happens to the flock. That is like their own child or their own mother or their own father, and they're just their heart breaks for them too, and they're that caring about it.
Exactly. So the shepherds, and then the fifth ministry is the teacher, who speak truth. I mean, they teach.
Yeah.
They bring wisdom. They bring understanding. They develop formation. They cultivate a love of the scriptures. They love theology. They love applying theology. They love developing resources for learning. They love thinking about life and implications to what is happening. They love new ideas. They develop traditions, within church context that are very healthy. They create a culture of lifelong learning. And so there are people who love to learn, and love to communicate and love to apply truth, into the community of which they're a part. And so a great gift again, and again, it's not like you get a pure apostle or a pure teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have mixes in us.
Yeah, usually God's going to call you to one office or the other if He's called you to that office, but you're going to flow in some of the other gifts that are given.
Exactly.
And, that's like my wife. She's highly prophetic, but she's also a very good shepherd and things. And so
I think some people would say that with all apostles, particularly, which that role is probably less defined. You would have Paul, who was strongly apostolic, but with a strong teaching gift if you read his epistles.
Yeah.
And evangelistic.
Yeah.
And Barnabas, an apostle, who was a shepherd.
Yeah. Highly pastoral.
Yeah. So I think that you get different types of apostles, and I would say with I know a few prophets, and a couple of them are very pastoral. You would think that the prophet, not shepherd at all, but I know really pastoral. Yeah. So I think that we all have a mix in us, and it's a bit like some of the psychometric testing of Myers-Briggs or Belbin. We all have a mix, and I think this Ephesians 4 was the first ever psychometric analysis,
personality test or whatever,
and we all have a bit of a mixture. Is we have a predominant gift that we operate in, and then these other gifts that come alongside.
Well, and they all help each other. And I think too many people want to, I'm this, but there's also that gift. The teacher helps the apostle gift because the teacher gift gets good theology
Yes.
and helps balance out the apostolic who wants to just move forward and move forward and move forward. And the teacher can come along and give that good theology to the rest of the body and say, this is what the Word of God says. This is how we're going to stick to the Word of God.
Yeah. And I think that for the functioning together, the flowing together is
Oh,
important. So,
yeah.
Now, what's the other interesting point to make is that if I look at the New Testament, what I see the local church governance is different to this. So you get in the local church eldership.
Yep.
And then those who serve the deacons. Yep. And so it feels to me that in a local church context, we are there in the eldership capacity as mothers and fathers to the community. And then these gifts function beyond that as well.
Yeah.
So Paul isn't sitting in the church in Antioch as the apostle. He's sitting there as an elder. And I think in Acts 13, it was the prophets and the teachers who were leading the church at that stage. But really, there's an eldership in place, which is the sort of mature men and women who are modeling by the example of their lives what it is to follow Jesus. And so therefore, I think for me, I sit in my local church as an elder, as a leader. When I function outside of the local church, I function in my apostolic role, rather than me being Billy the Apostle in my local church. So I sit alongside my brothers and sisters.
But when you step back into your church, you become Billy the elder, the father of the house, the mentor.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where for me it's just bringing that. But I'm gifted in an apostolic capacity with a little bit of teaching in me, a little bit of evangelistic in me, a little bit of prophetic,
But it all benefits what you're doing in your apostolic call, and it benefits anybody that you come in contact with.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I come into a church, I don't come in like over and above, and in that I come alongside, and I can only come into your church if you invite me.
Yeah,
I'm not going to demand, and I will be received as opposed to expected.
Yeah.
So I think I forget what it says now, but when you receive a prophet, you receive a prophet's reward.
Yep.
When you receive an apostle, you receive an apostle's reward. So it's about being received, not about me demanding that I'm the apostle. You need to submit to me.
Yeah. You come in and leave a deposit for the church.
Exactly.
The gifts that you have leave a deposit in the church, and all it does is benefit the church.
Yeah.
And then when we receive that gift, it's like when we open that gift up, when we receive that gift, it benefits us.
Yeah.
Not, he came and he talked and we didn't get nothing out of it.
Yeah, right.
You left something for us till the next time you come back.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
So that's the 5 ministries we see in Ephesians chapter 4. And there's loads to unpack there.
Yeah, a lot. And we'll get into some more in-depth unpacking of those fivefold ministries, and we're gonna have some more guests, and it's gonna be good. I know we're gonna do some more apostolic
good
dive into it, and then we'll get some more guests on to do some more of the other 4. So,
excellent.
All right,
thank you, Matt.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Pioneer Podcast. We hope it encouraged you, and you know what? Share it with someone. We're on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Casts. So all the links are below. And you can find us at www.pioneerpodcast.org. And we'll see you next time.